Hey everybody, thanks for checking out this video. Today on this segment, we're going to talk about how tight should you tighten a bolt. It's one of those things that as an industrial maintenance technician or mechanic, we don't use a torque wrench at our job. There's actually only one piece of machinery that is requires a torque wrench. And we're not even going to get into that piece of machinery right now. We're just going to talk about, in general, how tight should you tighten a bolt. Well, you want to tighten the bolt, and this isn't a cop-out answer, as tight as you can get it without three things happening. A, breaking the bolt. B, stripping the head out on the bolt. And C, pulling the threads. Now, how do you know? Well, you need to use a little bit of good judgment, and this is something that's going to happen over time. So when you're new to the field, or if you're a new mechanic, you're probably going to break a few bolts, and you're probably going to strip a few Allen bolts especially. You might even strip out some regular hex bolts if you're using like a 12-point socket, because a 12-point socket isn't going to grab as well as, say, a 6-point socket. And an Allen bolt is more likely to strip out in most scenarios than, say, a regular hex bolt. So you need to take all these factors into play. Now, when it comes to potentially breaking the bolt off, that's generally more on your small metric and small standard bolts, where if you just over tighten them, they snap off. Or if you're not putting new bolts in after you've taken something apart, those bolts could have been over tightened previously and stretched just a little bit, and they're just ready to snap. So you got to be mindful of that as well. Also, if you're using an impact, even on a large bolt, say one with an 1.1/8" head on it, you could easily break that bolt off using an impact if it's, say, the third or fourth time that that's been taken off and put back on. So a few of the things I like to recommend is replace your bolts. Bolts are cheap. When it comes to, would you rather replace the bolt for 20 or 5 cents, 20 cents, 30 cents, whatever it is, or risk breaking that bolt off and potentially turning what would have been a 20-second task and putting the bolt in into a 30-minute headache of now you have to extract a broken bolt. So when it comes down to how tight should a bolt be, it should be tight enough that it doesn't come loose without being damaged. And there's actually a few things that you can use to help your bolts stay tight without having to really risk snapping them off by just over torquing them. A couple of things are, A, you can use lock washers. Those are very handy. It helps keep tension on the bolt head, and it keeps tension against the internal threads of whatever you're threading into, which therefore helps keep the bolt from shaking loose. Now, if it's something that has a lot of vibration, that could still fail, and then you might, if it's a through hole where you're going to use a nut on the other side, you could use a lock washer and a nylon nut or a locking nut. That'll assist you. And if it's not a situation where you're going to be using a nut, if it's just you're threading into a piece of equipment, you can also, if the application requires it, use a little drop of Loctite. However, I do not recommend getting heavy-handed with the Loctite, because that could lead to broken bolts when you need to extract them. So when using Loctite, I recommend that you just keep in mind that a little is a lot and a lot's a mistake. And if you follow that principle, you're going to be in pretty good shape. So when you're trying to figure out how to tighten a bolt, just keep all of these things that I've discussed in mind. I hope this helps you. I hope that you're enjoying your career or the potential path on becoming an industrial maintenance technician or a mechanic. And just remember, you're gonna break bolts, it's gonna happen, and you're gonna come across bolts that other people have stripped out, and you just have to be aware and know that it will happen, but using these tips and tricks, you can minimize it and help make your job a little bit easier. So I hope you enjoyed this helpful tip and enjoying this series of day in the life of an industrial maintenance technician. Thank you and have a great day.